everyone, and welcome to The Perfect Place to Start. This is a series dedicated to embracing resilience and fostering genuine conversations. I'm your host, Meg Gluth. In each episode, I have the privilege of speaking with remarkable guests who have navigated some of life's most challenging experiences and come out the other side by taking the next step forward. In this series, we dive into topics often left unspoken: mental health, the true meaning of success, navigating relationships, and the full spectrum of life's highs and lows. Our mission is to break the silence around these issues, offering a platform for open and honest dialogue that can inspire and empower us all. The inspiration behind this series comes from my own journey. My experiences have taught me that the darkest moments often hold the greatest potential for growth. Join us as we uncover the powerful stories of resilience, celebrate victories, and learn how to navigate life's challenges together. This is the perfect place to start, and every conversation is a step forward. Hey everyone, this is Meg. Welcome back to The Perfect Place to Start. Today we are talking to my friend, Jen Jewson. And Jen is the person I would describe to a lot of people as my red phone. She's heard me call her that a few times. Not necessarily always for matters professional. I think the more challenging moments in our lives as professionals and as people really have to do most often with the things that are closer to our heart. And in particular, for me, one of the major challenges, struggles, constant works in progress in my life is that of being a mom. And so that is an area I'm always looking for some guidance, some mentorship, and frankly, just the reassurance that I'm not screwing up my children indefinitely and permanently for all eternity. And for that, I think we all need people. And I think we need people who are willing to be honest about the struggle. The first time I talked to Jen about my struggle as a mother was when I was struggling to become a mother. And that is how I think we began our sort of bond on this subject. This is all I'm going to say about this. We're going to have a really cool conversation today about places that we start in our lives and places that we find ourselves in our lives that maybe we wouldn't pick to be in, but how that transforms us and where we end up from there. So Jen, thank you for coming and talking to me today. Introduce yourself in any way you see fit to this group of people.
Well, thanks, Meg. So I am Jen Jewson. I am a 28-year vet in the pet chem industry, and I am a 20-year vet with my child. Both are strong achievements in my mind, and I really do appreciate the time to spend with you today, Meg, because I think this is a very sensitive topic that most people don't want to share because they're too afraid. And it is something, I think it is a tie that has, pulled us together to be friends for as long as we have. And I think for me, it's been a blessing.
Absolutely. Starting there, the title of the podcast is The Perfect Place to Start. And from knowing me and from sort of knowing a little bit about this, that one of the things that we're doing is saying that all of these places that are perfect places to start aren't necessarily perfect, to be honest. Talk to me about the start of becoming a mother. How would you tell that story? How would you tell your start?
It is a marathon. It is not a sprint, I will tell you. And I think for me, it was, I turned 30. And at that moment, I think I knew, like, now's time, right? You hit this milestone, and you're like, okay, I'm now ready to be a mom, been working for a while. And I think when you get to that point mentally, it can't happen fast enough for you, right? Because you're already there, right? And so, so for my husband and I, we decided this is what we wanted. And we started down that journey, and it wasn't happening fast enough for me. And so, I went to talk to my doctor, and of course told me I also need to be patient, but we decided to try injectable drugs, and I got pregnant on the first try. And I thought, well, this is awesome. I'm on my way. Everything's good, and I thought, this is great. If you work hard enough, you'll get to where you need to be. I was always of that mindset, just lean in, and then, I got to 10 weeks and the heartbeat was gone. And, and that's for I think people don't understand how painful that is unless you've been there. It's devastating. And, and I don't know what's worse, right? Trying to get pregnant and not getting there, or getting pregnant and not being able to get to the end point, right? And so I think they're both equally painful. And I think back in the day, when you come to work, you don't share your personal stuff at work, right? It's not always that I think today, I think our work environments and cultures are a lot different. But back then you didn't really share a lot of your personal stuff. And it is a huge cross to bear. And I think part of it is because as a woman, you think it's your fault and you failed. And, and it's hard emotionally to deal with.
Yeah.
So
First of all, thanks for sharing that, because that's so hard. And when you and I first talked about all of this, I think you and I are both crying in a booth somewhere in some restaurant. But, and so it's emotional now, as I'm sure it was for you then. You talked about having this mindset as a woman, and particularly probably professionally, where if you work hard enough, or you lean in, or you do the next indicated thing, then this result will come. You go to some appointment to confirm that you've lost a pregnancy. What does that moment do to that Jen who says, okay, I was working so hard, I did all the right things? Like, what happened for you there emotionally?
well, I think for anyone, it's that moment of disbelief, right? This doesn't happen to me. It happens to other people, right? And then I'm very stubborn, as my husband will tell you. And it's like, we're going to go for it again, and it's going to be great, and everything's going to be fine. You talk to the doctors and they're like, yes, this is not uncommon, right? Because it's not. Well, okay, you go for it again and it doesn't work again, right? And you get pregnant, and 10, 11 weeks, there's no heartbeat. And you get to this point where you're just like, then you get to a point where I think you're like, oh God, I'm being punished for something, right?
Yeah.
I'm a good person. And you carry this thing inside that I think is hard. And the reason I love this podcast that you're doing, and I never talked about this, it took me a very, very long time to share. You're one of the very few people I talked to about this, because emotionally it was just so hard. But I think the reason I wanted to share this is because I don't want people to make the same mistakes I did. I carried it internally for so long, and that, people don't need to do that. And I will cut to the chase and tell you that I had 3 miscarriages, and it was devastating. And it took me a very long time to realize that it is absolutely okay to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And, and go in there and cry and scream and say it's not fair. And mental health is so important. And I think people underestimate that. It took me too long to get there. And that's, I think, one of the reasons I wanted to share this today, that sometimes you can't talk to your family members because they're not sure what to say. Right. And, and I love my parents and my husband, but they're also emotionally attached to me, and, and they can't fix it. Right. And I think it's okay. When I finally hit that aha moment, and I was in a very dark place. I was very sad. I'd come to work and I worked very hard because it was my safe zone. I knew how to do that, and I could turn off the emotion, and I could just work, work, work. The hard part was when you go home at night, and then you get trapped in your own mind about things, and things will trigger you, right? I mean, I'm going to tell you, going grocery shopping, I didn't buy Q-tips for like 2 years because they're in the baby aisle. Like, I would not go buy them, right? I would go tell my husband to go pick them up because I couldn't walk down the baby aisle without crying. And I think, the realization that I needed someone to talk to was a big deal. And I went, and it was important for me to go do it, and just to vent my frustration, because I needed somebody else, not a family member, to say, it's not your fault,
Yeah. How do you
right?
think you knew you were at a point? And how would someone listening, honestly, like, but share it in the context of your own experience, because I guess that's all we can ever speak to. But like, how do you know, especially if you are a woman that's used to like, or a man, I mean, this is across the board, but like if you're a person that's used to handling everything on your own and shouldering down and pushing forward and doing all of that, like, how did you know, Jen, like, I'm at a place where actually I can't help myself out of this hole? Like, do you remember why you knew, like, okay, I'm at the end of what I can do for myself here?
I, for me, it wasn't my personality, right? I'm a very optimistic, happy person. And I think I just realized that I was not me anymore. I was becoming somebody who was very negative, very, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. And I think, I wish I would have stepped out of that sooner, but I also think I needed somebody else to talk to, because I also started to have this realization that I might not get there. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
may not have a kid. And then and I needed to sit and talk to somebody. And I came to this aha moment of, a parent is not somebody that just that gives birth to a child. A parent is somebody that raises a child, no matter how that child gets there.
Yeah.
And I needed time to process that a little bit, because, I was open to adoption. And
Yeah.
and the pregnancy experience was something I wanted to do, but but really, what is your end goal? Your end goal is that child. And that
Yeah.
that to me was what, so I actually just I needed to work through that in my mind a little bit, again, because I think you get yourself set on, I want to get pregnant, I want to have a child. So you become very myopic and focused. And I think talking to a counselor for a while about, you know, so what if this doesn't happen? Okay, so what?
Yeah.
I'll go through the adoption process, and, and I'm still going to be somebody that can be a mom.
Yeah.
And so, and I needed somebody else to work through that with.
Right. I'm not going to recite your resume here, but you said I might not get there, and it strikes me that like maybe that was the first time in your life that you had a goal or some vision that you were saying to yourself, like, I might not get there. Like,
Yeah,
is that true?
100%. I'm
Yeah.
way A personality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I go at
That's why we get
everything.
along, Jen.
That's exactly right. I do everything 110%. I've got an advanced education. I lean
Yeah.
in every day. Like I was saying earlier, my belief always was, if I come in and I work hard, I will achieve. But you know what? It was also, for me, I will tell you, a great learning for the rest of my life. And that is, there are some things that are out of your control, and you just have to accept it and move on. I am a better leader today because I don't need to control everything, and I know that things will just happen. And my goal is to just figure out how to work around it and make sure that everything is going fine for the team that I work in. And
Yeah.
so, as painful as that was, and I think that's why today I can talk about it a lot more. It took years to get there, right? But I think I'm older now and wiser, I guess. But I think that, I realize that these things do happen for a reason. You don't see it at the time, you don't understand it. But I am smarter, I am better, and I'm a better leader, because I know there are some things that you just don't have control over.
And so, in a way, we talk a lot with a lot of the guests on this podcast because we tend to meet people sort of in some of their worst moments. Um, and it's by design that those people are people who didn't stay in the muck. Everybody who's come on this podcast have been people that have been some low places, and then now, I mean, we don't necessarily talk about where everybody is now in their lives, but it's clear that they aren't people who laid and wallowed in that
Right.
beyond the time that's appropriate to do so. Um, but you said something really important, and I think this is for me probably my lifelong struggle, and I want to know if it's still yours. This concept of saying like this life lesson in this, like there's always beauty that comes from ruin, right? There's treasure out of ruin. you learn in this that things are out of your control. And frankly, mostly everything is, right? I mean, I think if you're type A, we just have maybe a stronger belief that that's not true, but I don't know if we're right. Can you tell me, like, today, in this day and age, sometime after this has happened, right? Like, did you just learn that right away? Like, did you internalize that right away? Like, did you internalize that lesson of like, some things are out of my control and I'm going to learn how to do that? Or is this something that's an ever evolving journey for you? And if so, like, how do you do that?
It's an ever evolving journey, I
Yeah.
think, right? Because I'm just going to tell you, and I think it didn't really hit me. So, so maybe for your listeners, the positive is I did eventually get pregnant.
We're going
I
to talk
did.
about that.
And so, but when you have a small child at home, your focus is then just on that, right? But I think as James grew and I had a little more time to think about things, and also as I changed, right, growing in my career, I think all of this is interconnected in some way, right? You move up in your company, you have lessons at work and you have lessons at home. All of those things start to intertwine. And I just, and again, I'm a very optimistic person. So I look back on some of these things, you learn as a leader, you learn as a parent, and you're like, you know what? I do believe things happen for a reason. And I'm just going to roll with it. And eventually I'm going to figure out why. Today it might be the muck that I'm sitting in, but I'm going to figure it out later. And you do eventually get there. You do. But I think it's ever evolving in my mind.
Yeah.
It's not the flip of a switch. At least it wasn't for me.
Tell me about James. How did he come to be in the world?
It's a good news story. So I will tell you, when I was trying to have James, I was living in another state and my job moved. And so I moved and I said to my husband, like, I'm done. Like, I did IVF. I did all of that. Like, I did it all, right? I went through the full gamut and we moved and my body was tired. My brain was tired. And I just was like, you know what? I'm taking a year off
Yeah.
and I'm going to figure out what I want out of life, right? I just can't do this. And the specialist I was going to said, there is another specialist in your state that I just want you to go talk to her. And here's your file. And my file was like
Yeah.
3 inches long. So we were living here a few months and I thought, you know what? Her office is near my office building. I'll go just sit and chat with her. So I sent her my file in advance and I sat with her and she's like, I looked through everything. She's like, I'm going to tell you, I don't know what's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's unexplained infertility is what they call it, right? And so I liked her from that moment because she was just
Yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
right? And I said to her, I said, well, I'm really disappointed. I wanted you to tell me there was a problem. And she's like, why? I said, because I'm a problem solver. If there's a problem, I can fix it. If I don't know what it is, I can't fix it. And that's where my struggle is. And she goes, well, but what if I told you it was a problem you couldn't fix? I said, I would still be okay with that because then I know to disconnect and move on. I was still stuck in this, I can't fix it in mode, right? And I can't achieve, right? So your point, I'm an A-type personality. And so she's like, well, look, she's like, if you were going to do something with me, what would you do? And I said, look, I would do injectable drugs with you one more time. I'm not going to do IVF because none of the IVFs were successful. And it's expensive and it's taxing on your body. And that's just a boundary I'm not willing to cross. And so she said, totally fine. She's like, okay, let's do one cycle together and let's just see. So we did. And I got sent to Europe for a couple of weeks to work on a project. And I called her in a panic. And she's like, Jen, this will either happen or not. Go to Europe, think about what you need to do. She's like, look, if something is going wrong, know where the hospitals are. But she's like, Jen, you can't live your life around this. So I did not so I was in Europe and I hit the 10th and the 11th and the 12th week. And you're just like thinking, okay, maybe it's over and I just don't know it yet. Right. And that was the attitude that I had. I was so negative about it that when I came home, I think I was around 13 weeks or 14 weeks. I told my husband, don't even go with me to the doctor's appointment because I just had this pit in my stomach that it wasn't going to work. And I showed up to the doctor's office. She was out that day with an emergency patient. So one of their attendings waited on me and they did all the scans and he wasn't saying anything. And I was like, you know what I mean? It's like those couple of moments were like, it was like a year for me just sitting there.
Yeah.
And he finishes everything up and he looks at me and he goes, well, congratulations, you're going to have a baby. And I was like, what? And, of course, and so I did what any person would do. I burst into tears, right? Because this was like a 3.5 year journey. And I think he looked at me like I was completely crazy. Because he was not part of the infertility side. He was part of the other side of the OBGYN practice. And he just looked at me and I said, you just have no idea. I said, this has been a 3.5 year long journey. And he said, I really wish your doctor was here today. He said, because I think she would just be so thrilled, and so I just, I just sat there in disbelief and I said, well, what are my chances? Right. Because I've got the panic. Right. And he's like, look, you're almost 15 weeks. There's, the 95 or whatever, 97% chance you're going to make it the rest of the way. We're not worried. And so I was, of course, worried because of where I was. So I didn't call my husband. I waited till I got home and I told him, and he was in complete and utter shock, just like I. And it was it was that moment in time was so incredibly special because the journey to get there was so hard. Now I will tell you, I worried to death the rest of my pregnancy on and off because I'm like, what if things aren't fine? But as you get bigger, you get more confident that you're going to get there. But I always said that every baby is special. Every baby. My child is just that much more special because I had to work so hard to get there. And I also realized too how lucky I was because again, a lot of people don't get there. And and it's also made me I'm more sensitive around other people and thoughtful. I don't ask people if they have children. Like I try and be that. I try to realize that I don't know what is at their home at night, right? And so it just again, I look back at it was a great life lesson. Like I'm a more sensitive and thoughtful person too, right? So, but yeah, it was incredibly exciting, and I was incredibly blessed and thankful that I had that chance to get there finally.
I think it's interesting because two things stand out for me. Number one, you're in this place that I teared up when you said the doctor looked at you and said, there's nothing wrong with you. So interesting, right? To like be in a place in your life where you're grinding at something and to have somebody say, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, ooh, like power, right? And then to say you're pregnant, like you have this kid, like holy shit. Of course you remember, so I'm not going to say do you remember, but tell me about the moment you held James for the first time. What is that?
So James came early. So my story is not an easy one. It never is, right? This whole thing was very so my pregnancy was fantastic. So I'm just going to tell you, I had no morning sickness. I felt
lucky girl.
Well, and I kept saying it should be this way because I had to work this hard, right?
That's right. Yes.
And so everything was great up until 35 weeks. And so I'm a runner, I'm a swimmer. So I continued to be very active the whole time I was pregnant with James. Now I did stop running and started walking because I was a little too wobbly at some point. But at 35 weeks, I came home from work, felt like $1,000,000. And that evening I got sick as sick could be. I was not able to keep anything down. I was getting very dehydrated. And I called my doctor and they said, well, maybe it's just something you ate. And I said, no, there is something wrong. I can just tell. And I said, look, I'm not taking no for an answer. I have to come in. So, because again, my past history, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I went to the hospital and they saw me right away and they checked me in because I looked bad. And they put an IV in to rehydrate me and everything, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me initially. My blood pressure was fine. All my vitals were fine. Everything looked great. And it turns out that I just naturally have low blood pressure, like I'm lower. And so when you get eclampsia or preeclampsia, the way they tell is high blood pressure. Well, they didn't figure that out right away because it wasn't apparent. So they ended up taking a blood sample, and that's how they figured out there was something wrong. And so I was in the hospital Friday night until Sunday morning, and they came in and they said, "Well, look, we know what's wrong with you. Okay, good."
Awesome.
And they said, "Look, you're gonna have to do an emergency C-section, and we've got to get this kid out." And I looked at him and said, "I haven't finished reading my baby book yet. I don't think you understand. Like I needed like 5 more weeks. Like, what are you talking about?" And so, and the guy was so funny. He laughed. He goes, "No, the kid is coming out." And the doctor was super nice to me. He's like, "Do you want to try and have him naturally? Our preference is a C-section. We're just going to take him." And I said, "Look, I want the kid. At the end of the day, that's what I want, and I want him to be healthy. So just go in, let's take him out, and I'll be fine." So I tell you that story because I actually didn't get to see James for a couple of days because I normally what happens after you have the baby, your body will kind of revert itself and you're fine. That wasn't happening for me. I was still incredibly sick. And I ended up having a plasma transfusion, and everything was fine. It all, it was a little bit scary for a little while. So it was a couple of days before I had a chance to hold James. But when we went into the nursery, because he was preemie, so he was a little early. He was in level 2, which was fine. We knew he was going home. But when I saw this little child for the first time, like I just couldn't believe that this is my child,
Yeah.
right? It's incredible. So I looked at him. The first thing I thought is, "Oh my God, he looks just like my husband." I mean, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And my husband and I were arguing what his name was going to be, and obviously we named him after my husband because he looks just like him.
Yeah.
But that moment when I went to hold him, I just was like, I had this feeling, I just had this moment where I was so relaxed and so happy because I knew I finally made it,
Yeah.
right? And you don't realize the level of like stress upon you, or because you get that level of anxiety and
Yeah.
it's normal, right? For the longest time
Yeah.
until all of a sudden this wave of calm just hits
Mhm.
you. And I looked at my husband and I was like, "Oh my God, this is like the greatest thing,"
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so, it was, for me, it was, I can't describe it. For the rest of my life, it will be just the most, again, like I said, every baby is special. That child was just that much more special for me. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get teary eyed just thinking about it because it was the end of a very, very, very long journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Two things that I want to ask you about. And maybe first, like we can just pause for like a little piece of advice because I think what's um implied in this is like just this this energy of like keeping going and all of that. If you knew someone was listening that's sitting in the same struggle pile that you're in, and I was in so many different ways but similar ways in sort of that, what's your advice to a woman that that is, sort of contemplating the going on you're going forward and continuing, but also what would you say to the woman who might have to make the decision to just quit? Like, I think there's this fork in every person's road, and what's cool is that in your story, you kind of hit that fork of like, okay, I think I want to be done, and you got up off the mat for one more, but you could have easily said I'm done and then moved your way towards peace there. Like, what's your advice for somebody who's kind of in that spot, Jen? Because not everybody gets to finish with a happy ending, right? Or they do get to
Oh,
finish the happy ending, but
100%.
not the ending they wanted, maybe.
No, and I think that's right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share today. And I'm actually surprised I've been able to keep it together so far. It's not easy,
I'll cry for both of us here, Jen.
but I'm getting to that point. But I will tell you, so here's my advice to any woman that's going through this. You have to make the decision for you. And that is a hard thing to digest because you've got all these people around you, family, friends, everybody's going to tell you what they think you should do, but they're not you.
Yeah.
And there are people that are judgmental about certain things as well. Like I have one child. I have one child for a reason because if I wanted to have another child again, if I were blessed, because I was so sick the first time, the chances were very high I would be sick again with the next pregnancy. And, a lot of times, and my story was a very fortunate one. Sometimes when people get eclampsia or preeclampsia, it starts at 25 weeks and the baby's in a risk factor point, right? So I made a conscious decision to have one kid. And I had a number of people telling me, you can't just have one child, you need to have a second child. Like, and I say all that for a reason. I think people are well intentioned a lot of times, but you need to decide things for yourself. And that's why I went to a counselor, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I wanted to make this decision on my own terms without other influences. For me, it's hard for any woman to decide like when is it time to just pivot and do something else.
Yeah.
But I also think too, I tell my story because I feel like you shouldn't, there is a chance that you might not get there and that's okay. And you don't want to continue to try and do the same thing over and over again and wear yourself down to a point where everything else becomes bad, right? The rest of your life, you don't enjoy your partner, you don't enjoy going home, you don't. So I think you have to make that decision for you. And I did it in a safe space with a counselor, somebody that wasn't attached to me in some way. That way I could kind of walk through the gamut of what my options are and what it meant for me. Because for me at the time, I really, to be honest, was booking this in my life as a failure. And I really could not get over that. And it took me time talking to her that a parent is a parent, no matter how that kid gets there. And I say that and it's so easy, but I'm going to tell you, it took a lot of months for me
Yeah.
to kind of get to that point. And so I think for me, whatever you choose, however many kids you decide to have, or you don't have, or you adopt, it's got to be on your terms.
Yeah. I think you're destigmatizing here not only like all of the heartache and the sort of unspoken, I mean, even today, I think a lot of people suffer in silence around the journey to parenthood for sure. You're also destigmatizing um, using help for mental health issues, however they arise in our life. But there's one third thing that I think that you do and have done for me. So we know you worked so hard to be a parent. So then this child arrives in your life, but Jen, you didn't stay at home then and become a stay-at-home mom. You're also a woman who has a really thriving career. You get life from that career. You get energy from that career. You want to continue to do that. With the time we have left, I wonder if you would speak to the group of particularly moms, because I don't mean to insult dads, but it is a different journey. It just is to be a working mom. How do you and how did you, through the course of James's life, then you have this child that's a literal miracle laying in your arms, but you decide to continue to work. How do you, in your mind, what was that like for you? And what's your sort of advice or just life story that you can share for those of us, I include myself in this, that look at that and go, man, I wanted this so badly, and but I really want to be good at this, but I also get life from my career. Like, how do you keep all of those tensions and those identities in you, Jen, and do it in a way that honors your own integrity?
Yeah, I think every one of us has working mom's guilt, right?
Yes.
And so, for me, when I had James, I felt like when he went to I actually put James in our church daycare just because it was a really nice place. And I wanted James to have interaction with other children. And because I knew I was just going to have one. And I thought that was important that he grows up with something like that. And so I was not sure what I wanted to do. And so rather than make a drastic change, and I really liked the church daycare, I said to myself, I'm going to go back to work for now.
Hmm.
And I'm going to do it because I know that this is not irreversible. I can walk away if I want to, right? And I think women, we like make the big decision. It's not, right? These things
Yeah.
are not irreversible. And so I went back to work, and I wanted to see how I felt about it because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I love my child. I love my child. I also love being in the office, and I feel like I'm a better parent because I'm a working parent. I'm a happier parent. And I don't think there's any shame in that, right? And again, you have to make your own choice. I think women around, they're not ill-intentioned, but I think that some women want you to do what they're doing because it validates their choice.
Oh,
And you know what I mean?
I do. Yes.
And you know what? And people just have to get over that. I am like, I do the opposite of what people do all the time. And it's because maybe it's just the way my brain is wired. But I went back to work, and I realized that I could make it work, and I am a happier parent for it. And I just took 1 year at a time, and I was very meticulous about planning my calendar so I could attend all my son's events, and it just got to a point where it was okay. It was good. And I like now I look back again, things happen for a reason. I look back at my choice, and my son sees me as a strong partner in a relationship. Isn't
Yeah.
that a good thing? Right?
Yes. Yes.
And whoever James marries and hopefully one day gets married, right? And so, or not, but whatever his choice is,
He
right?
might live with you, Jen. You don't know.
I love him, but he needs to flee the nest. I will tell you that my son loves me too, but he doesn't want to live with me forever. There's no doubt. He's 20 now. So,
Yeah.
but I would say that, but isn't that a great thing to show your child that
Yeah.
you and your partner are strong partners together, right? I think there's goodness in that. And so did I mess up in my mommyhood? Yes, absolutely I did. But I will tell all the moms out there, we beat ourselves up more than we should. And I will just tell you one anecdote which makes me giggle.
Love it.
My son was in first grade, and it was Christmas time, and the entire elementary school was going to watch the Polar Express. So you were supposed to send your child to school in their pajamas. I did not send my child to school in his pajamas. And he came home and let me know this, right? And I just felt horrible. I felt horrible for like 15 years, right? So I
Yeah.
was telling somebody this story about being a horrible parent. And when my son heard me he heard me telling this other person this story. And James was like, what are you talking about?
Oh God.
What Polar Express movie? What a poignant moment for me, right?
Yeah.
I've carried this baggage for like 15 years, right? So, again, I look back, and that's why it's great that you have this podcast and we share these things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I beat myself up this working mom's guilt for this one thing that I really messed up on, right? That my son doesn't even remember,
Right.
doesn't care about. And
Yeah.
so, if you take anything away from that story is that we have to take ourselves a little less seriously sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know it, and if you have more good days than bad days, you're successful, right?
Yeah.
Because you cannot do it all. You just can't. And you've got to figure out what your path should be. I told you my path. I enjoyed working. One of my very best friends quit, and
Yeah.
she's a wonderful mom, and
Yeah.
she loved it, and that was good for her, and that was her choice, right? And
Right.
I think we each have to find our own paths. And again, don't listen to the noise around you. And you've got to just make the decision that at the end of the day, am I comfortable with what I did? And if you are, then that was the right choice.
Yeah. I think that's sort of like the theme of everything you're saying, right? Like at the end of the day, we ought tune into what it is that we need and who we are in the world and what our path is and live that, sort of with blinders and earmuffs on, save for those voices that you invite in. What's your one final like parting piece of advice to somebody who is hearing this and for whatever reason, whatever part of the story just like hits them square in the gut? Like somebody could have given you a piece of advice throughout this long string of the arc of your journey here. What would you have wanted to hear?
So for me, I think parenthood is a journey.
Yeah.
And I think that, the things we just talked about, for example, about not taking it seriously. It's easy to say a lot of these things. It's hard in the moment when you have somebody saying to you that you should do something differently. So I use this word a lot and at work. Give yourself grace.
Mm.
Give yourself some grace. Not every day is going to be perfect. It is a journey. I think none of us realize until you're a parent how long that journey is and that it does change your life tremendously. And it doesn't matter how you get there. It does not matter. But I think you've got to, if I could give one piece of advice to people, give yourself some grace every day because, not everything's going to be a home run and that's okay.
Yeah.
Things happen for a reason. You may not know it at the time, but in retrospect, I think we see it. And if we really self-reflect, I think we connect those dots.
Thank you. Thank
You
you
are
for
so
making the
welcome.
time to come on my little podcast here and to be so honest. I told you when I asked you like we don't need this to be for everybody, but we need this to be for somebody. So on behalf of myself and that somebody, thank you for making the time today, Jen. I love these conversations with you and this is I think so important for people to hear.
No, you're very welcome. And I love what you're trying to do, which if I can contribute just a small part to help just one person,
That's
happy
it.
to do it.
One person helps one, helps two, helps three. That's what we're trying to do. So, all right. Thank you very, very much, Jen, for your time today. And thanks everyone for listening. And we will be back again soon.